Billionaire alien mom dropped her plate after seeing wingless daughter fly, when one shocking human changed everything. Dr. Elias Ward paused at the base of the crystal staircase, clutching a small case of instruments in one hand. The azure spire rose above him, its glass-like walls refracting the light of 3 suns into 1,000 shifting hues. Streams of luminous water cascaded through transparent channels, singing as they fell into distant pools. To most, this place would have seemed like paradise. To Elias, it was a reminder of how far he stood from the world he was about to enter. He took a slow breath, aware of the faint hum of security drones hovering near the vaulted entrance. His credentials had been checked twice on arrival, then again by an attendant whose skin shimmered like ocean light. The aliens of this system were unmistakable. Bright blue skin, soft and iridescent, as if they were carved from light itself. They moved with a calm grace that made every human step feel clumsy in comparison. "Dr. Ward," said a low, melodic voice. "Lady Marana will see you now." The speaker was tall, towering over him by nearly a head, 4 slender arms folded neatly across his chest as he gestured toward the stairway. His eyes were silver, not metallic but alive, like the reflection of starlight on deep water. Elias nodded, shifting his case. "Thank you." The staircase wound upward in slow spirals, each step a pane of transparent crystal that seemed to float in midair. Below, the garden shimmered with bioluminescent plants, their roots suspended in air, their blossoms pulsing in rhythm with unseen currents. Every corner of the estate seemed alive, breathing, watching. At the top, the air grew cooler, perfumed with something faintly sweet. The corridor opened into a vast chamber lined with curtains of shimmering glass. In the center sat Lady Marana Vera, heiress of the Vera Consortium, a figure of staggering wealth and quiet sorrow. She was unlike any being Elias had ever seen. Her skin glowed in soft shades of blue and white, her features sharp yet delicate, eyes a deep, haunting violet. Around her throat hung a chain of platinum rings, each etched with swirling sigils. Her fingers, long and graceful, toyed absently with one of them, a heavy band set with a pale gemstone that seemed to hold light inside it. "Dr. Ward," she said without rising. Her voice carried an effortless authority. "You came farther than most humans ever do." He inclined his head. "It's an honor, Lady Vera." "Honor," she echoed quietly, then gestured for him to approach. "We have little of that left where my daughter is concerned." "Sit." Elias obeyed, setting the instrument case beside his chair. He had seen wealth before, the orbital villas of the core, the floating palaces of the upper colonies, but nothing quite like this. Everything in the Solaris Hall seemed crafted to reflect light, to make the air itself shimmer. "I was told you are not a doctor of medicine," she said, studying him. "No," Elias admitted. "I was trained as a neural engineer. I design adaptive interfaces for damaged sensory systems." Her violet gaze lingered on him. "And yet you were expelled from the Core Institute." He hesitated. "For testing unapproved methods." "My work wasn't exactly welcome among the council." A faint smile ghosted across her lips, humorless, tired. "Then you may fit in well here. The council disapproves of me, too." She rose then, gliding across the room toward a high archway. Her gown shimmered with woven crystal fibers that caught the light like molten glass. "Come," she said, "meet my daughter." The next chamber was smaller, quieter. Soft light poured through a domed window above, scattering across pale marble floors. In the center, a young girl sat on a hovering chair, her legs tucked beneath a blanket of silken weave. Her skin was lighter than her mother's, a sky blue hue with a faint glow beneath the surface. Her white hair spilled like mist over her shoulders, and her eyes, pale, clouded, empty, stared into nothing. "This is Lyra," Lady Marana said softly, her voice trembling, just slightly. "She's 10 cycles old. She was born without functioning optic nerves. Every healer, every surgeon, every geneticist from the inner worlds has failed to restore what she lacks." Lyra turned her head slightly, her face lifting toward the sound. "Mother?" "I'm here, my light," Marana whispered. Then to Elias, "Speak to her." Elias cleared his throat. "Hello, Lyra." "My name is Elias." Her lips curved faintly. "You sound nervous." He blinked, startled, then smiled. A little. All the others were nervous too, she said. They thought if they spoke softly enough, I wouldn't know they were afraid. Afraid of what? She tilted her head. Of failing. Lady Marana turned away sharply, pretending to adjust a data panel near the window. Elias felt the air tighten around them. Maybe they were afraid of disappointing someone brave, he said softly. The girl's expression brightened, her milky eyes flickering faintly with reflected light. For the first time, something in her gaze seemed almost aware. Marana's composure faltered just enough for him to notice. That night, Elias was given quarters overlooking the gardens. The walls were alive with faint pulses of light, synchronized to the rhythm of distant machinery. Beyond his balcony, the horizon burned with the last embers of sunset, casting the spire's towers in soft gold. He should have felt gratitude. Instead, he felt the same gnawing uncertainty that had followed him across the stars. Lyra's condition wasn't genetic, not in any way he understood. Her optic nerves were intact, but dormant, like roots buried under frost. Dozens of specialists had declared it irreversible. He had read their reports before coming, each filled with the same phrases. No measurable potential, no viable connection, no hope. But there was something in her responses. The way she noticed things no one else did. The precision with which she described sounds, air currents, even heartbeats. Her mind wasn't blind, it was waiting. When dawn came, Elias requested permission to spend the day with Lyra. Marana agreed reluctantly, under the condition that 2 attendants remain nearby at all times. He found Lyra in the East Conservatory, her hands resting on the petals of translucent flowers that glowed from within. She smiled when she heard his footsteps. You walk differently than the attendants. Lighter. You're thinking while you move. He chuckled softly. Is that bad? No, she said, turning her head toward him. It sounds like curiosity. He sat on the edge of the marble railing, watching sunlight scatter across the vines above. Tell me something, Lyra. What do you think sight feels like? She was quiet for a moment. I think it's like sound, but faster. Like knowing something before you hear it. Like warmth that has a shape, Elias smiled faintly. That's a better answer than most adults would give. You're not like the others, she said. The healers came and left. But you're still thinking. Thinking doesn't always mean understanding, he replied. But it means you haven't given up. He stared at her, words failing for a moment. In her small voice was a quiet kind of faith he hadn't earned. Over the following days, he began experimenting, not with invasive procedures or machines, but with subtle stimuli. He used light frequencies woven into ambient sound, temperature shifts mapped to pulses. Most experiments yielded nothing. But one afternoon, while he adjusted a calibration node, Lyra gasped. Something moved, she whispered. What do you mean? Elias asked quickly. It was like brightness, not on my skin. Inside, just for a moment, his pulse quickened. He recalibrated the node, lowering the output. Do you feel it now? Lyra's unfocused eyes widened. Yes. Like shadows waking up that night, Elias barely slept. He sat by his console, sketching neural models across holographic pages. The breakthrough was small, barely measurable, but it meant there was still potential. He refined the interface, built a prototype from the materials he had smuggled through customs, adaptive neural threads, light-reactive circuits, and a crystalline amplifier core he had designed years ago but never dared test. He told no one. Not yet. Not until he was sure. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves. Late one night, as he fine-tuned the device, the door to his quarters slid open soundlessly. Lyra's voice floated in from the hall. You work when everyone else is asleep. Elias spun in his chair, startled. She stood in the doorway, barefoot, the faint glow of her skin casting light on the floor. Lyra, you shouldn't be out of your quarters. I followed the sound of your tools. She smiled faintly. You hum when you work. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Old habit. You're making something for me, she said simply. He hesitated. It's not ready. You think it might help me see? Elias froze, the words struck too close. Maybe, he admitted softly, but it could also hurt you. And I couldn't forgive myself if it did. Laura stepped closer, her small hands reaching forward until her fingers brushed the table's edge. Then I want to try. He shook his head. You don't understand the risk. You're the only one who ever said there was something still working inside me. Her voice trembled, but she didn't back away. If you're right, then maybe I'm not broken. Something in him cracked then, the wall of restraint, of caution. He knelt before her, meeting her clouded gaze. You are not broken, Lyra. You never were, she smiled, a small, radiant thing that pierced him deeper than any words. From that night on, they worked in secret. Elias explained every step to her, how the device would read the faintest neural echoes of light, how it might awaken dormant pathways. Lyra listened with an intensity that astonished him. Each session drew them closer, teacher and pupil, dreamer and believer. When Lady Marana discovered them days later, the chamber erupted in fury. What have you done? She demanded, her violet eyes burning. You experiment on my child without consent? Elias stepped forward. I would never harm her. Then explain this, she snapped, gesturing to the faint shimmer of light pulsing around Lyra's visor. What are you doing to her mind? Helping her feel light, he said quietly, not forcing it, guiding it. She's responding. You can see it, Lyra's small voice cut through their argument. Mother, I can feel you. Marana froze. Your light, the girl whispered. It's warm. It moves when you do. The ring in Marana's hand slipped, clattering onto the marble floor. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then she crossed the room, falling to her knees before her daughter. Lyra, she whispered, voice breaking. My child. Lyra reached out blindly until her fingers brushed her mother's face. I see you. Marana's composure shattered. She gathered the child into her arms, tears streaking down her luminous skin, mingling with the light that seemed to bloom from both of them. Elias turned away, throat tight, the sound of her sobs echoing through the hall. He had imagined success 1,000 times, but never this, never the sight of a mother clutching her child as though the universe had been rebuilt around her. For the first time in his life, Elias Ward allowed himself to believe that miracles might exist, and that perhaps just this once, one of them had begun with him. Lady Marana did not sleep that night. The lights of the azure spire dimmed to a low pulse, but she sat beside her daughter's bed, watching the faint glow beneath Lyra's closed eyelids. Her thoughts raced faster than the currents beyond the walls. Elias's device was not supposed to exist. It used frequencies forbidden by the Council of Neural Ethics, methods deemed unstable, even dangerous. Yet, in the silence of that chamber, her daughter had seen her. It had been no illusion. Lyra's trembling voice had carried the weight of truth. The air itself had changed when she spoke. Still, Marana's mind fought it. To believe it meant risking everything, her reputation, her fortune, her position among the elite. A single failure could destroy them both. But to deny it meant crushing the first real hope her daughter had ever known. At dawn, she summoned Elias. He entered quietly, his expression unreadable but weary. His jacket was creased, his eyes shadowed. He stopped just inside the doorway, waiting for her to speak. You've done something reckless, she said finally, her voice low but sharp. Something extraordinary, he answered. She stood crossing the room until they were only a few feet apart. The blue light spilling from the window played across her face, reflecting in her violet eyes. Do you understand what happens if the council learns of this? I imagine they'd send their enforcers, he said. They'd call it dangerous, claim I've tampered with natural order. But they'd still come because they'd want to own it. His tone carried no arrogance, only certainty, and they won't stop until they do. Marana studied him for a long moment, the silence between them taut as wire. Then quietly she said, then they must never find out. From that day forward, secrecy became their shield. The estate's laboratories were locked under Marana's personal authorization. Attendants were dismissed, guards reassigned, access logs rewritten. Only Elias, Marana, and Lyra remained in the inner chambers. Each day, the girl's progress deepened. The first time Lyra described the sunlight on her mother's gown, Marana nearly wept. It's moving, Lyra whispered, tracing the air with her fingers. Like water, but it glows. Elias recorded every word, his mind racing through endless refinements. He adjusted the neural threads to sync with her heartbeat, fine-tuned the light feedback loops, and expanded the interface range. Every experiment became a dance between caution and discovery. Marana's initial suspicion softened into reluctant fascination. She began to assist him, holding instruments steady or recording readings as he guided Lyra through visual tests. But not everyone in the spire remained blind to their secret. Rumors began to drift through the staff. Whispers of light emanating from the upper chambers, of laughter long absent from the mansion's halls. A young attendant named Dahrain, ambitious and curious, started following Elias at a distance. He watched the human disappear into restricted corridors, saw Lady Marana herself breaking curfew protocols to accompany him. His curiosity soon turned to greed. Marana's fortune was legendary. Whoever brought the council evidence of her defiance would be rewarded beyond measure. Unaware of the eyes upon them, Elias and Lyra continued their quiet work. Each session strengthened her responses. She began identifying shapes, first blurs, then outlines, then forms that resembled faces. "You have lines around your eyes when you smile," she said one afternoon, tilting her head toward her mother. Marana froze. "Lines? They move when you laugh," Lyra said simply. Marana laughed then, an unguarded sound that startled even herself. Elias smiled quietly but said nothing. He didn't want to break the fragile magic of the moment. As days turned to weeks, the bond among them deepened. Elias's admiration for Marana grew beyond his control. He saw in her not just power or grace, but a mother's raw courage, the kind that had driven her to defy empires. And though he never spoke of it, Marana sensed it too. There were moments, fleeting but undeniable, when their hands brushed during calibration, or when their eyes met over Lyra's laughter, and something wordless passed between them. Neither dared name it. One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, Marana stood beside Elias on the balcony overlooking the floating gardens. The air shimmered with the faint hum of biolamps, the vines below glowing like rivers of starlight. "You've changed her life," she said quietly. "And yours," he murmured. She turned to him, surprise flickering in her eyes. "You think this redeems you?" "No," he said after a moment, "but it gives me a reason to keep trying." The simplicity of his words lingered long after he left. By the third week, Lyra no longer needed the hovering chair. Her legs were weak but steady. Elias built her a balance frame to help her walk the observatory's length each morning. Marana watched in awe as her daughter took slow, uncertain steps, guided not by sound or touch, but by sight. "The walls breathe," Lyra said once, reaching out to touch the crystalline surface. "They glow when the light changes." Elias exchanged a glance with Marana. "She's not just seeing," he whispered. "She's perceiving light differently, beyond normal range. The visor might be amplifying frequencies even your people don't register." Marana frowned slightly. "Then she's becoming something new." "No," he said softly. "She's becoming what she always was meant to be." That same night, Dahrain slipped into the communications hall. He activated a private relay to the council's outer branch and sent a coded message. "Unauthorized neural experimentation confirmed within Vera Estate. Human involvement suspected." The transmission vanished into encrypted light, and he smiled to himself. By morning, the Empire would know. Elias sensed the change before anyone told him. The air around the spire felt heavier, the corridors quieter. Guards whispered, servants avoided his eyes. Marana appeared distracted during their session, her answers short, her gaze distant. When he asked, she dismissed it as nothing. But when night fell, she appeared at his door, her face pale even beneath her blue glow. "They know," she said. Elias's pulse quickened. "The council?" She nodded. "An inspection vessel is en route. They claim it's a routine audit, but we both know what that means." He swore under his breath, pacing the room. "We can hide the device, erase the logs. They'll search everything," she said. "And if they find even a trace, they'll take Lyra. They'll call her an anomaly, a weapon, a threat." Elias stopped pacing. "Then we can't let them find her." Marana's expression hardened, a flash of the authority that had once commanded half the system's trade routes. "There's an escape conduit beneath the spire," she said. "Old emergency tunnels from before the reconstruction. Few remember they exist. You'll take her there at dawn. Elias hesitated. And you? I'll delay them, she said simply. They'll demand I hand over my research. I'll give them everything but her. He wanted to argue, to refuse, but her eyes left no room for debate. You would risk everything, he said, for a human's mistake. She stepped closer, her voice quiet but fierce. For my daughter's future. The room fell silent. Outside, the sky burned with the first glow of approaching ships, their silhouettes dark against the stars. Somewhere deep in the estate, alarms stirred from slumber. Lyra slept through the first tremors. Elias sat beside her on, the prototype visor resting in his hands. The light within it pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat. He thought of everything that had brought him here. The failures, the exile, the endless wandering, and realized this was no longer about redemption. It was about protecting what they had created together, a miracle born in defiance of fear. When dawn came, the horizon shone blood red. The ships were descending. And in the silence before the storm, Elias Ward made a promise he would never forget. No matter what waited beyond the spire, Lyra Vera would see the world he had dreamed for her. The sound of the engines grew louder with each passing second, a deep tremor that vibrated through the glass walls of the azure spire. Elias stood by the window, watching as streaks of light split the dawn sky. The Council's inspection fleet descended in perfect formation. Sleek vessels, the color of obsidian, wings glowing with blue energy. Their arrival was both majestic and terrifying. Somewhere below, the staff had begun the emergency protocols. Lights dimmed to half intensity, security systems hummed awake, and the estate's communication relays went dark under lockdown procedures. Lady Marana moved with purpose, her presence commanding even in chaos. She gave orders with clippered precision, her attendants scrambling to obey. But when her gaze met Elias's for an instant, he saw the fear behind her composure. Lyra stirred in her bed as the vibrations deepened. The air is shaking, she murmured sleepily. Elias turned to her, forcing calm into his voice. It's just ships arriving, Lyra. We'll be fine. She reached toward the sound of his voice, her fingers brushing his sleeve. You're afraid, she whispered. Your heart sounds different. He hesitated, then crouched beside her. We're just going on a short trip, that's all. Somewhere safe for a little while, she nodded slowly, though he knew she didn't understand the danger. Her trust was absolute, and that frightened him more than the ships in the sky. Marana entered moments later, her long cloak sweeping across the floor. She had removed her ceremonial jewelry, every ring except one, the silver band Lyra had once tried to hold as a child. The conduits are open, she said quietly. My guards will delay the first wave of inspectors, but once they reach the inner levels, you must be gone. Elias adjusted the straps on his pack. If we leave through the old transport shaft, where does it lead? The lower cliff tunnels, she replied. There's an abandoned observatory built into the rock. No scanners reach that far. You'll be invisible there. She reached into her cloak and pressed a small device into his palm, a slender disc glowing faintly blue. This will mask your neural signatures for a short time. Use it only when they're near. He closed his fingers around it. What about you? Marana's expression hardened. Someone has to answer their questions. If they don't find me here, they'll send hunters after us both. They'll still send them, Elias said quietly. The council doesn't forget. Then let them come, she whispered, and for a moment he saw the fire of the woman who had once challenged entire trade houses to protect her empire. Her gaze softened as it drifted to her daughter. Take her away from all this, Elias. Let her see something other than walls and crowns. The first explosion shook the ceiling above them, a deep thunder that made the floor tremble. Dust drifted from the vents. Lyra gasped and clutched his arm. Marana turned sharply toward the corridor. Go, she said. Now. Elias lifted Lyra into his arms, wrapping the soft cloak around her shoulders. She clung to him silently, her breath quick against his neck. The corridor outside was already alive with flashing lights and warning sirens. Alien guards in gleaming armor sprinted past, their voices echoing through the vast hallways. Elias followed Marana through a service corridor lit only by emergency strips along the floor. The spire's hum had changed, no longer steady and serene, but panicked, alive with alarms. They reached the lower lift chamber, where a wide shaft opened into darkness. A circular platform waited, its control panel flickering erratically. "The power grid's unstable," Elias muttered. Marana touched the panel, channeling a pulse of bioluminescent energy from the veins beneath her skin. The platform flared to life, descending slowly into the depths. "This is as far as I go," she said. "They're too close." Elias turned to face her, searching for words. None came. She looked at him one last time, her voice trembling despite her strength. "Protect her as if she were your own." "I will," he said simply. The platform lowered out of sight, and her silhouette vanished behind the rising mist. The descent felt endless. The hum of the engines overhead became a distant roar. Lyra rested her head against his shoulder, her voice soft. "Mother's light is fading." Elias's throat tightened. "She's still with us." "You'll see her again." When the platform stopped, they stepped into the shadowed tunnel. The air was cold, damp, and filled with the faint scent of stone and metal. Bioluminescent moss grew along the walls, casting ghostly reflections across the floor. Elias adjusted the small lamp on his wrist and led the way through the winding passage. Above them, the estate shook again, followed by the sound of muffled explosions. The council's soldiers had breached the outer walls. He could almost imagine the chaos. The shimmering blue armor flooding through the corridors, the hum of weapons ready to neutralize any threat. Marana would be standing in the Solaris Hall, calm and defiant, her crown gone but her authority intact. The image burned in his mind, a promise and a burden all at once. They reached the first junction, where the tunnel split into 3 paths. Elias hesitated, consulting the map projection on his wrist. "Left leads to the cliff edge," he murmured. "Right goes to the old vaults." "We take the center." Lyra lifted her head slightly, her pale eyes flickering faintly under the glow. "Someone's coming," she whispered. "Not far." He froze. Her sight had grown sharper since the last adjustment, her awareness now stretching beyond light and sound. He killed the lamp instantly. "Hold on to me," he whispered. They pressed against the cold stone as the sound of footsteps echoed from ahead. Heavy boots, metallic voices in the alien tongue. Soldiers. Elias activated the small disc Marana had given him. It pulsed once, then a shimmer passed through the air, cloaking them in a faint distortion. The soldiers appeared moments later, tall, bright blue figures in armor that rippled like liquid metal. Their rifles cast beams of scanning light across the corridor. "Search every sector," one commanded. "The human is with the child. Capture them alive if possible. The lady is to be detained." Elias held his breath as the light passed inches from Lyra's face. Her small fingers tightened around his sleeve, but she didn't move. The soldiers advanced slowly, their footsteps fading into the distance. Only when the silence returned did Elias deactivate the cloak. The air felt heavier now, as if the tunnel itself sensed their desperation. They continued for what felt like hours, deeper into the mountain's bones. Finally, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, the abandoned observatory. The ceiling rose high above, carved into an arch of glass that looked out onto the endless horizon. Morning light poured through, casting fractured beams across the floor. Lyra gasped softly. "It's everywhere," she whispered. "The light, it's alive." Elias set her down gently, watching as she reached toward the rays, her fingers trembling as they met the glow. "Describe what you see," he said quietly. "It's like threads," she said. "So many colors. They move when I breathe." He smiled faintly. "That's the sunrise." She tilted her head. "It feels like home." He turned toward the horizon where faint contrails streaked the sky. The council ships were repositioning, perhaps searching the surface. They had time, hours, maybe less. He activated his wrist console, sending a scrambled transmission into the void. It was a signal coded to reach a single destination, an old contact in the outer colonies who owed him more than one favor. If they were lucky, a transport would come before the council found them. If not, they would run again. Behind him, Lyra laughed quietly, spinning in the scattered beams of light. The sound pierced the gloom of the chamber, fragile but alive. For a brief moment, Elias allowed himself to feel it, the warmth of something pure, untainted by politics or war. Then he heard the faint echo of engines in the distance, a low hum that vibrated through the glass. He froze. Lyra stopped spinning. "They're coming again, aren't they?" she asked softly. He nodded, though she couldn't see the motion. "Yes," he said, "but this time, we'll be ready." He turned to the equipment in his pack, pulling out the prototype visor. Its glow flickered like a heartbeat in the dim chamber. Whatever happened next, the fight had only just begun. The hum of the engines grew louder, echoing through the observatory's glass dome like distant thunder. Elias crouched by the old control console, pulling at corroded wires and ancient ports, while Lyra watched from a nearby platform, her pale eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The visor rested in her lap, its thin filaments twitching with dormant energy. "Can they see us?" she asked softly. "Not yet," he murmured, "but they will if I don't reroute this system. These panels are older than I thought." She tilted her head, listening to the flicker of his tools. "You're nervous again. You keep holding your breath when you work." He smiled faintly without looking up. "It's an old habit. Hard to break." The dome trembled again as a sonic ripple washed across the cliffs, shaking dust from the glass. The inspection fleet was scanning the mountain, their sensors slicing through rock and atmosphere alike. Elias could almost feel the pressure of their search tightening around them. He finally found what he was looking for, a dormant transceiver node buried beneath the console. "There you are," he whispered, prying it open. He connected his wrist interface and began to override the ancient security code. The holographic display flickered to life, showing faint signals still linked to the estate's network above. Marana's command node was dark. That meant the council had reached her. For a long moment, Elias just stared at the display, his jaw tight. Lyra shifted closer. "Something happened to Mother." He didn't answer. She stood then, her balance uncertain but her expression clear. "You feel it too." Elias exhaled slowly, shutting down the interface. "She's strong, Lyra. Stronger than both of us, but we can't help her if they find us now. We need to keep moving." The child didn't argue. She adjusted the visor over her head, its faint light outlining her features. Elias turned away to gather his pack. When he looked back, Lyra was standing near the dome's edge, facing the sunrise. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "So much color." "But there's something else behind it." Something dark. Elias joined her, following her gaze to the horizon. The first of the council's drones appeared there, tiny black specks gliding in tight formation. "We're out of time." He reached for her hand. "Stay close. No matter what happens, don't let go." They descended through a side corridor that curved deep into the mountain's heart. The walls were carved smooth, veins of faintly glowing mineral running like rivers beneath the surface. Elias's wrist display mapped the path ahead in flickering blue lines, but half the readings were corrupted. Somewhere above, faint concussions rolled through the stone. The council wasn't searching anymore. They were breaching. Lyra walked beside him with surprising steadiness, her senses guiding her when the lights failed. At times she would pause, tilting her head as if listening to something he couldn't hear. "They're close," she whispered. "5 of them. One heartbeat is heavier than the others." Armor. Elias froze. "Which direction?" "Ahead," she said. "Down the right passage." He pressed his hand against the cold wall, searching for alternatives. A maintenance hatch loomed to their left, its locking mechanism covered in dust. He forced it open, revealing a narrow shaft leading into darkness. "Inside," he said. She didn't hesitate. The shaft was tight and steep, but it angled away from the main tunnels. They climbed downward, the metal groaning under their weight. The sound of voices echoed faintly behind them, sharp metallic tones that grew louder as soldiers entered the corridor they had just abandoned. Lyra's hand brushed his shoulder. "They're angry," she whispered. "One of them wants to take me alive." Elias climbed faster, every muscle burning. When they reached the bottom, he forced open the hatch and pulled her through. They emerged into a vast chamber filled with ancient machinery. Huge gears and crystalline engines lined the walls, remnants of some long-forgotten project. The air hummed faintly with residual energy. Elias guided Lyra toward the center, where a console still blinked weakly. He ran his hand across the surface. "This was part of the old observatory network," he said under his breath. "If I can power it, I might be able to mask our signal again." Lyra walked slowly around the chamber, her hands brushing against the metal walls. "It's alive," she murmured. "Sleeping, but alive." He looked up at her, startled. "What do you mean?" The machines hum like voices, she said softly. They're waiting for someone to listen. Elias hesitated, then activated the main conduit. The chamber flickered as the dormant systems awoke, lights spiraling up the walls. A low vibration rippled through the floor. You might be right, he said. Now let's see if it wants to help us. He worked quickly, cross-linking circuits and bypassing outdated safety locks. The hum grew louder until it resonated through their bones. Then the entire room went still. A sphere of light formed above the central console, a projection, faint and flickering, but clearly sentient. It shimmered with pale blue luminescence, its voice soft and echoing. Unauthorized activation detected, it said. Identify purpose. Elias swallowed hard. I'm Elias Ward. I'm trying to reinitiate the observatory's masking grid. We're under threat from the council. The projection pulsed once. Council authority supersedes all local protocols. Please, Elias pressed. They'll take her. A child. She's not a threat. She's a miracle. The sphere hesitated, its light dimming. Miracle, it repeated softly as if testing the word. Lyra stepped forward then, her visor glowing brighter. Can you see me? She asked. The sphere turned towards her, the light flickering violently for a moment before stabilizing. Visual anomaly detected, it said. Your neural frequency is undefined. Elias watched in astonishment as the sphere shifted color, its light deepening into violet. I see you, it said finally. A tremor shook the floor before he could respond. The ceiling cracked as dust and debris rained down. They've breached the outer tunnel, Elias shouted. The projection's light flared. Warning! External interference detected. Security override in progress. He turned to Lyra. We have to go. But she stood transfixed, the visor flickering wildly. Wait, she said. It's showing me something. The sphere pulsed again, projecting faint images into the air. Blueprints, ancient symbols, records of the spire's construction. Elias glimpsed words in the alien script, diagrams of neural networks intertwined with energy conduits. It's connected to her, he realized aloud. The same resonance field. Lyra's voice was trembling now. It says I can stop them. Elias grabbed her shoulders. No, you can't. The rest of his sentence was drowned by the roar of collapsing stone. A breach charge detonated somewhere above, sending shockwaves through the chamber. The projection flared once more before vanishing into static. Elias pulled Lyra toward the far exit, shielding her as debris fell around them. The tunnel beyond opened onto a narrow ledge overlooking the canyon below. The sky was filled with streaks of blue light from the council ships, their search beams slicing through the mist. We can't stay here, he said, his voice ragged. Lyra's small hand found his, her grip steady. Then where do we go? Down, he said, scanning the cliffside. Far below, hidden in the shadows, he could see faint lights flickering in what looked like an abandoned mining settlement. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. He slung the pack over his shoulder and looked back toward the shattered observatory. For a moment, he thought he saw the faint outline of Marana's projection in the dust, a flicker of her face, eyes bright with defiance. Then it was gone. They began the descent, the narrow path winding through jagged stone. The air was thin, each breath sharp and cold. Above them, engines roared, and beams of light swept across the cliff face. Twice they froze as patrol drones passed overhead, their scanners burning through the mist. Each time, Elias activated the small masking disc, its energy field cloaking them in distortion. Lyra clung to him, her body trembling from exhaustion, yet her voice remained calm. They won't stop, she said quietly. They think I belong to them now. Elias tightened his grip on her hand. You belong to no one. Not them, not me, not anyone. She smiled faintly through the haze. Mother said the same thing once. The words hit him harder than any weapon could. He didn't answer. They kept walking, the world narrowing to the rhythm of their steps, the pulse of light in the distance, and the promise that somewhere ahead, there was still a place where she could see the sunrise without fear. They reached the bottom of the cliff just as a second wave of council drones swept over the mountainside. Elias pulled Lyra beneath the remains of a rusted platform, the metal cold and slick with condensation. He waited until the light beams passed, his pulse steady but his mind racing. The abandoned mining settlement stretched before them, half buried in dust and shadow. Broken towers jutted from the rock like bones, and the faint hum of dormant machinery vibrated beneath their feet. The air smelled of ozone and iron. Somewhere deep inside, faint lights still flickered, emergency systems that had survived centuries of neglect. Elias exhaled slowly. "We'll rest here." Lyra nodded, her pale eyes scanning the dark. She had grown quiet since the collapse of the observatory, as if her sight now showed her more than she wished to see. He led her into a large hangar, the ceiling arched and blackened with soot. The floor was scattered with broken crates, cables, and a thick layer of dust that dulled their footsteps. He cleared a space near a deactivated generator and pulled out a thermal blanket from his pack. Lyra sat beside him, her fingers brushing over the metal floor. "This place feels sad," she said softly, "like it remembers too much." Elias glanced around the vast, empty hall. "Maybe it does. Places like this never forget what they were built for." "What was it built for?" she asked. "Extraction," he replied. "Mining crystals that powered half the outer colonies before the council deemed them unstable. They abandoned it after the collapse. But if we're lucky, the communication lines might still work." He unpacked his tools, connecting them to the generator's cracked interface. The panel flickered, then groaned to life, spilling weak light across the room. Lyra removed the visor from her head and held it in her lap. The faint glow from the device illuminated her face, outlining her small, sharp features. She looked older somehow, not in years, but in the way she carried herself. Elias crouched beside her. "Are you all right?" She hesitated before answering. "When the lights touched me in the observatory, they didn't feel like light. They felt like voices, thousands of them. Some were afraid, some wanted to help." Elias frowned. "Voices? Not like yours," she said, "more like thoughts. I think they were part of the machines, the old ones." He rubbed his temples, trying to process her words. The resonance field that had connected her to the observatory might have triggered a dormant network. If the machines had recognized her frequency, then she had somehow become a key, a living interface between consciousness and code. The implications were terrifying. Before he could respond, a faint sound echoed from the tunnel behind them, the scrape of metal on stone. Elias snapped off the generator light and grabbed the masking disc, pressing it between his palms. The faint shimmer enveloped them both. Lyra stiffened. "They're here again," she whispered. "Two soldiers. And someone else." "How far?" he murmured. "Close." The footsteps grew louder, echoing through the hangar. Elias peered through the darkness. 3 silhouettes entered. 2 armored figures and a third wearing a long coat. The leader removed their helmet, revealing the deep blue skin and pale silver eyes of a council inspector. Their face was angular and cold. "Spread out," the inspector ordered. "She can't have gone far. Our readings show residual energy in this area." The soldier moved methodically, scanning the shadows with handheld devices. Elias held Lyra close, barely daring to breathe. The inspector paused near the generator, studying the faint warmth left by his tools. "Someone was here," they muttered. Then their voice shifted, low and venomous. "Bring the drone array." We flushed them out. One soldier left to retrieve the equipment. Elias's mind raced. The masking field would fail if the drones released pulse waves. He turned to Lyra. "Can you still sense them?" She nodded. "The one who stayed is afraid. He's thinking about something hidden, under the floor." Elias looked down. The cracked tiles beneath their feet glowed faintly with seams of crystal, old power conduits, likely linked to the mine's forgotten systems. A plan took shape in his mind. He whispered, "When I tell you, close your eyes." He deactivated the masking field and slammed his hand against the floor panel, channeling his wrist interface into the ancient conduit. Sparks erupted, followed by a deep rumble as dormant circuits flared to life. The hangar lights burst awake in a blinding cascade, and the generator roared. The inspector spun around, shouting orders, but it was too late. Energy surged through the chamber as the mining systems activated, reawakening the old defense grid. Turrets unfolded from the walls, scanning for intruders. Elias grabbed Lyra and dove behind a crate. Now, he shouted. She squeezed her eyes shut just as beams of light erupted, sweeping across the hangar. The air filled with the metallic scream of energy discharges. The soldiers fired back, but the turrets moved faster, targeting anything emitting an active signal. Within seconds, the hall became a storm of light and noise. Elias shielded Lyra as debris rained down. The inspector's voice cut through the chaos. "Deactivate! Deactivate!" The lights flared once more, then went dark. Smoke filled the air. When Elias opened his eyes again, only one figure was standing: the inspector, blood trickling down their temple. They looked directly toward him. "You can't run forever, human," they hissed. "You've created something the council will never allow to exist." Elias lifted his head, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "She's not something. She's someone," the inspector sneered. "Not for long." They raised a signal beacon, pressing it before Elias could react. A high-pitched tone filled the air, the unmistakable sound of a locator pulse. Reinforcements would be inbound within minutes. Elias reached for the masking disc, but Lyra's hand stopped him. Her eyes glowed fiercely beneath the smoke. "I can stop it." He turned toward her, alarmed. "How?" "The same way I heard them before. I can make the machines listen again." "No, Lyra, it's too dangerous." She shook her head. "If I don't, they'll find us anyway." Before he could stop her, she stepped forward into the center of the room. The visor flickered to life, its filaments extending like silver threads of light that sank into the cracked floor. The humming started again, low, deep, and rhythmic. The walls shuddered as dormant systems across the settlement came alive, responding to her presence. The locator tone faltered, then died. The inspector staggered back, staring in disbelief. "What are you?" Lyra's voice was distant, layered with echoes. "I'm what you were afraid to create." The light around her expanded until the entire hangar blazed like the heart of a star. Elias felt the shockwave before he heard it. Every remaining drone outside the settlement exploded in midair, their circuits shorted by the resonant surge. The inspector tried to flee, but the collapsing ceiling swallowed them in a roar of dust and stone. When the noise finally faded, only the hum of the remaining machinery filled the silence. Elias ran to Lyra, pulling her into his arms. The visor went dark, its glow extinguished. For a moment he feared she'd gone still, but then her hand tightened weakly around his sleeve. "Did it work?" she whispered. "Yes," he said, though his voice trembled. "You stopped them." She smiled faintly, her eyes half open. "Then we have to go before more come." He nodded, helping her to her feet. Together they slipped through a broken side door into the cold air beyond. Above them, the night sky burned with distant engines. The council would regroup. They always did. But as he looked at the faint light still pulsing beneath her skin, Elias realized the truth. She was no longer just seeing the world. The world was beginning to see her back. They reached the far edge of the settlement before sunrise, moving through the ruins as the cold wind howled between the shattered towers. Elias kept his arm around Lyra's shoulders, guiding her through the rubble. The visor no longer glowed as it once had. Its filaments dimmed from exhaustion, but faint traces of light still pulsed beneath her skin like living veins. The world around them seemed hushed, as if waiting. "We'll rest soon," he whispered. But even as he said it, he knew there would be no rest until this was finished. Lyra's eyes turned toward him. "They'll come again." "Yes," he said quietly, "but not for long." Ahead, an old lift platform rose from the dust, half buried under collapsed machinery. He brushed away debris until he uncovered a functioning power node. The system flickered to life, projecting a faded holographic interface. A map shimmered in the air, displaying the valley below, an old transit line that led straight toward the coast. If they reached the coast, they could find one of the orbital relays, maybe even broadcast beyond the council's reach. Lyra sank to the ground beside him, drawing her knees close. "Mother once told me the sea sounded like a heartbeat." Elias smiled faintly. She wasn't wrong. He paused, his expression darkening. "Lyra, if we make it that far, you have to promise me something." "What is it?" "If anything happens to me, you keep going." You find somewhere safe, somewhere quiet, somewhere you can see the world without hiding. She frowned. You're not going to die. That's not what I said. But the way she looked at him, steady, unblinking, told him she already understood more than he wished she did. The lift groaned as it descended through the canyon, the walls glowing faintly with veins of crystal. The lower tunnels opened into an immense cavern where pools of light shimmered across the stone. Elias stopped, awed by the sight. The air was alive with faint static, the remnants of energy left behind by the resonant surge. We're still inside the network, he murmured, the one you connected to before. Lyra walked ahead, the reflection of her own glow mirrored across the pools. It's still speaking, she whispered, but it's quieter now. Like it's tired, Elias knelt by the edge of the pool, watching ripples distort the reflection of the ceiling above. Can you reach it again? The network? Maybe, she said softly, but it would cost me more than before. He turned to her sharply. No, not again. You've already done enough. If I stop, she said, they'll never stop chasing us. Mother said when you love something enough, you have to protect it, even from the world. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes, pale and clear now, no longer blind, did not waver. Before he could answer, the low hum of approaching ships reverberated through the tunnels. The Council's fleet had found them. He grabbed her hand. Come on. They ran across the cavern, their footsteps echoing off the stone. Above them, shafts of blue light broke through cracks in the rock as drones descended. Elias fired a pulse grenade toward the ceiling, sending a rain of debris crashing down to block the path behind them. This way, he shouted, leading her toward an arched doorway half hidden in shadow. Beyond it lay a chamber lined with massive conduits that pulsed faintly with light, the heart of the old resonance grid. If we overload this system, it could disable their sensors, he said. It might even cripple their ships long enough for us to escape. Lyra placed her hand on one of the conduits. Or I can talk to it again. He froze. Lyra, you can't stop me, Elias. It listens to me. It remembers me. Her hand pressed deeper into the light. Let me finish what I started. The drones broke through the barrier above them, beams cutting through the darkness. Elias drew his sidearm and fired, the recoil echoing like thunder. Bolts of energy struck the floor, scorching the metal. Lyra stood perfectly still amid the chaos, her body surrounded by a halo of blue light. The machines paused, their sensors flickering uncertainly, as if struggling to process what they were seeing. She whispered something under her breath, words in a rhythm he didn't understand. The conduits around her flared in response, and suddenly the entire cavern came alive. Streams of light surged through the air, weaving between the drones like threads of silk. One point on their engines failed, their light dimming as they fell from the scheme. The resonance network was reawakening, but not as it had before. This time it moved with intention. Elias shielded his eyes as the brightness intensified. He could feel the pulse of energy through the floor, vibrating like a living heartbeat. Lyra's voice rose above the roar. They built all this to control, she said, but it can do more. It can give back. The light expanded outward in waves that shook the mountain itself. In the distance, ships faltered in midair, their weapons disarmed. The storm of light reached upward through the cracks, spilling into the sky. Elias could see it from where he stood, columns of radiance piercing the clouds, spreading across the horizon like veins of fire. Then, as quickly as it had come, the glow began to fade. Lyra collapsed, the visor falling from her head. Elias rushed forward, catching her before she hit the ground. Hey, he whispered, his voice raw. Stay with me. Her eyes fluttered open, and for the first time they were completely clear, blue like her mother's. It's over, she breathed. They can't find us anymore. You did it, he said, his voice shaking. You stopped them. She smiled faintly. I saw the world, Elias. I saw everything. And it was beautiful. Her voice trailed into silence. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the echo of the dying wind. He held her close, unable to speak. Then a soft glow began to rise from her skin, not the harsh brilliance of the visor, but something gentle and steady. It spread through the room, touching the conduits, the walls, the shattered machines. Everywhere it passed, the metal softened, reshaping into living crystal. Elias stepped back, watching in awe as the chamber transformed around them. When the light finally faded, Lyra lay still, her body weightless and peaceful, her form suspended in the crystal's center like an ember preserved in glass. Elias stood there for a long time, unsure how much time passed. The resonance field had gone silent. The world above was quiet. The war was over, at least for them. He reached out, pressing his palm against the crystal. "You saved her world," he whispered, "and you saved mine." The crystal responded with a faint pulse beneath his hand, like a heartbeat. He smiled through his tears. "Rest now, Lyra." Days later, the storm clouds cleared from the valley. The council fleets withdrew, their systems crippled by the network surge. Across the colonies, reports began to spread of children regaining lost senses, of machines awakening with strange empathy, of light behaving in ways no one could explain. The name Lyra Vera became a whisper carried on every signal, part myth, part truth. Some said she had become the voice of the machines themselves. Others said she had vanished into the stars. Only Elias knew where she truly was. He buried the last of his tools near the canyon's edge and looked out over the dawn. The sea glittered far in the distance, endless and calm. He thought of Marana, of her defiance, of the day she dropped her ring and held her child as if holding the universe itself. He thought of Lyra's laughter echoing through the gardens, of her small hands reaching for light she couldn't yet see. And he thought of the moment she finally could. He stood for a long time beneath the rising suns, the wind carrying the scent of salt and rain. Somewhere deep within the earth, the resonance network still pulsed quietly, alive with her memory. When he finally turned away, he didn't look back. He walked toward the coast, toward the horizon she had once described as threads of color. The sky shimmered above him, and for a brief moment, he thought he heard her voice in the wind, soft, clear, and full of wonder. "It's beautiful." He smiled, whispering to the empty air. "Yes, Lyra, it is."